everyone, it's Melissa from Welcome to the Woods. In this video, hopefully I will be presenting the most complete tutorial on how to cut and install crown molding. First, we're going to set up our miter saw. It's best to use an 80-tooth fine finish blade for trim work like this. I'm not taking my own advice, I'm using a 60-tooth. It was fine, but you should do an 80-tooth if you're buying a new blade. I created a stop fence. A lot of tutorials showed just marking on your miter saw with like a Sharpie, but I thought that this was a much better choice because it's safer and it's more consistent. I chose manufactured wood, so it was a completely straight edge and a piece of wood that was wide enough so the blade didn't cut all the way through. Long enough so I can clamp it off of the miter saw's base, allowing the miter saw to move freely between the 45-degree angles I'll be switching between. Obviously, it's important this stays completely parallel to the metal fence at the back of the miter saw the whole time that you're cutting. This stop fence will allow you to keep the same angle cutting your crown molding. The miter saw's blade should be 90 degrees to the base. It usually is, but you want to check that with a square and make sure it's perfect. We're not going to be doing a bevel cut on your miter saw, so we're not going to be tilting the blade differently than 90 degrees because we'll actually hold the crown molding against the miter saw base and the fence at the angle you'll install it against the wall, accounting for that compound miter that you're going to be needing for each inside corner and outside corner. To make your cut, you'll swivel the blade at a 45-degree angle either direction. Which side will depend on where you're cutting an inside or outside corner. This is very important. When placing your crown molding into the saw, you will always be cutting it upside down. It doesn't matter inside or outside corners, the crown molding gets put in upside down. The detailed part of the molding usually is the bottom, and that gets installed against the wall. So when you're cutting the molding on your saw, the detailed part of the molding, the bottom, goes against the miter saw's metal fence, and the top of the molding goes against the base. And in my case, it was against the stop fence that I set up. I remembered this with the saying top to table. The top of the molding is always against the miter saw table. Typically, on the back side of crown molding, it has two flat edges which you can place flush with the metal fence and flush with the miter saw base. This holds your crown molding at a 45-degree angle, assuming that you'll be installing it at a 45-degree angle between the edge of the ceiling and the wall. Well, in my room, I needed my crown molding to extend onto the ceiling higher so I could cover the edge of the Galaxy mural that I installed. So I adjusted my manufactured wood stop fence to be closer to the metal fence of the miter saw, and this created a sharper angle. When cutting inside corners, your molding edges create the shape of an A, exemplified well here. When cutting outside corners, your molding edges create the shape of a V. So I found it incredibly helpful to create basically test pieces of the cut that I was needing. So I had like a test piece that said left inside corner and a test piece that said right outside corner. And this way I could just always line it up and make sure my saw was set to the right angle and the right orientation before making my cut. And I'll cover the inside corners first. So to cut a left side inside corner, the molding comes into the saw from the right, and the miter saw will be set to 45 degrees also on the right. If you're cutting a right side inside corner, your miter saw will be set to 45 degrees on the left side of the saw, while the crown molding also comes in from the left. When cutting an outside corner, the only thing about setting up your saw that will change is what direction the 45-degree swings. If you're cutting a right side outside corner, your miter saw will be set to 45 degrees on the right side of the saw, while the crown molding comes in from the left, and vice versa for a left outside corner. So now let's talk about outside corners. So far, all the advice I've been giving you assumes the walls in your room meet at 90 degrees in the corners. My house is old, and this simply isn't the case. But cutting a 45-degree miter will not match up perfectly if you're not bisecting a 90-degree corner. This results in a small gap where the molding meets, and I was okay with that in the inside corners because I could fill it with a tiny bit of caulk. But on outside corners, however, this is more visible. So to find the exact angle I needed to bisect for the outside corner in this room, I used a trick with cardboard. I cut 2 strips of thin cardboard to the exact same width and length, and it's important they're the same width because you're actually going to lay these on top of each other and create the angle of the wall. So put one piece of cardboard flush against one side of the wall, put the other piece of cardboard flush against the other side of the wall, and you bring your cardboard pieces together until the corner meets perfectly. Now tape them together, okay? And the inside of that is exactly the angle of your wall. So since I'm using cardboard, I can fold this little template I created, I can fold it in half and bisect this angle without having to do any complicated mathematics. With the cardboard folded in half, that shows me the exact angle I need to cut on my miter saw so that my two pieces of crown molding will match up on this, non-90 degree outside corner. Now, what I discovered is that I needed to cut like 47 degrees instead of 45 degrees. So when I did that, this actually turned out beautifully. When it comes to installing the crown molding, the process will be much smoother if you install blocking first. I just ripped down furring strips to 1.25 inches on my table saw, and then I nailed them into place before adding the crown molding. The crown molding itself I installed with 1.5 inch brad nails, which were able to be so short because I knew it was hitting the wood blocking. If you're trying to install crown molding on just drywall, you can shoot your nails in a V pattern and it will likely stay in place. During install, I started in one corner and then worked my way around the room in the same direction, making my outside corner the very last pieces to cut. I strategically did this to allow forgiveness in material if I made a bad cut, which there were plenty, but this also allowed me to continually use one piece when checking my corner fits. My scrap piece of molding that gave me an example of what the left inside corner angle was stayed on the ladder with me during the whole process, because when you're installing a corner, you have to check how the other trim piece will line up in order to know where to nail your molding in. The angle can be slightly off unless you do this, so I would hold up my left inside corner scrap piece and at the same time tilt my piece of molding cut to the length on the right inside corner until everything lined up nicely. Then I would nail my right side in and get to work measuring my left. This ensured the crown molding was getting installed across the whole room at the same angle, especially important because I was not installing at the typical 45. Sometimes shaving a little bit off the back edge of the molding with a utility knife helped free up space for the molding to tilt perfectly into place and get a nice tight corner. When a piece of molding didn't span the length of the wall, I cut a 45-degree bevel in the molding so the seam where it met the other piece was less noticeable. I did not take my manufactured wood stop fence off for this. I simply added another piece of wood to the base that was the same thickness so that my molding would lay flat for this type of cut. Finishing your crown molding looks best when you caulk all the seams as well as where it meets the ceiling and the wall. I fill my nail holes with joint compound and then use a sandpaper sheet to sand when it's dry. Of course, give your crown molding a coat of paint after those steps to prevent the caulk from discoloring and give the molding a uniform finish. There you have it. We covered a lot in this video. Setting up your miter saw, cutting inside corners, measuring outside corners, and installation of crown molding. I hope you guys learned something, and if you did, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to know more about DIY and follow along in my projects, then be sure to hit that subscribe button on Welcome to the Woods. We'll catch you again next time. Thanks for watching.